Today I'm talking to Andrew Darda of Compass in Cape Coral and Fort Myers, Florida. With over 10 years of experience as a real estate agent, Andrew and the Darda Group are a top team doing well over 200 transactions a year. In our interview, we talk about his passion and skill for winning deals and maintaining boundaries that enhance rather than compromise his competitive edge. He shares his experience and how it's not about exhausting yourself, but developing the right focus that makes you unbeatable. Today, we talk about how he does it. Thanks for listening to the Jere podcast, where top real estate agents tell how they do it. This podcast was created for real estate agents across the country to come together, sharing ideas to take your, their, and our business to the next level. All right, everybody, it's the Jere podcast where top real estate agents tell how they do it. And today, with Compass of Cape Coral and Fort Myers, we have Andrew Darda with the Darda Group, also partners to Mike Darda, who has recently been on the show. Andrew, it's so good to have you. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Jere.
So everybody, I just want to reiterate, if you haven't listened to Mike's interview yet, the interview is about how to run a team. And it is literally the most well described, articulated, explained, and understood by a team member on how a team is run. I had my team listen to it a few times. And so when that happened, I said, we've got to have Andrew, your partner, and by the way, son, come on the show and give us some new fun perspective on the team as well as his success in the business. So that being said, and you guys do over 200 transactions a year.
Yes, ma'am.
Give us a little bit about your background, what your team looks like, and then I'd love to go into how you got into the business and go from there.
All right. Well, we've got, right now it's a small team. It's made up of 2 listing agents and 2 buyer agents. So the 2 listing agents are myself and Mike, and the 2 buyer agents are our wives. So.
And then do you guys have back office assistants, all that good stuff?
Yeah, we've got a full administrative staff. So that's a gal who puts in all of our listings and starts them from coming soon all the way to putting them on MLS and getting them up and running. We've got TC, transaction coordinator, that negotiates all of our offers. So we're not bogged down by negotiating offers or managing pendings. And office manager, personal assistants, and a runner.
Wow. So the structure is 2 listing agents, you and Mike, 2 buyers agents on the team who happen to be your wives, so they can't quit. Just kidding, kind of. And then for your support, you've got a listing manager, a closing manager who actually negotiates your deals, which I remember learning that from Mike last time. I was impressed and fascinated. And then the last one is someone who works as an office manager assistant. So kind of knows your schedule, knows your calendar, makes sure you remember things, where to be, what to do. You're ready for the listing presentations. You're ready for appointments, all of that good stuff.
Yeah, we call her our personal eavesdropper.
Oh, I like it.
Constantly listening. And the idea there is if we need something, it's on our desk before we have to ask for it.
That's your job, to eavesdrop and have something before I ask for it. Good deal. And then I also had talked to Mike a lot about how the team runs, and you guys, I think sometimes you have people out in the field who, because there's so many things you're being called to in the field, whether it's sign drop-offs, flyer drop-offs, lot boxes, things like that. Do you also still have that component to your team, or what does that look like?
Yeah, so for us, we just call him the runner. For the clients, it's our field coordinator or concierge. And his job's to put signs out, lock boxes, open up doors for vendors, and for our buyer agents, even help with home inspections and some of the non-dollar productive activities just to keep the sales team
making
efficient.
sure Yeah, making sure they get in the door and all of that good stuff. Okay, so I know a lot of people are probably dying to know you as a son of a realtor, like, didn't you know better? Like, how did that happen?
Whoops. No, I fought it. I did. I fought it, and I went to college. That didn't work out. And then I tried other things like stock trading or day trading, even. And after I lost all my money, I needed a real job, and that's when I became a realtor. So,
Awesome. Now that's funny. That was your real job, being a realtor. What is it? So, and you've been a real estate agent for how long?
a little over a decade. So I think it's 11, 12 years.
So 10 year, I mean, you did a few things and they didn't stick, and being a realtor stuck.
I love the sell. So for me, whether it's professionally or personally, I'm always trying to sell something in a conversation. So it was a natural fit.
So you naturally, like, you're almost this, there's, for lack of a better word, kind of you like to win a deal. I was going to say deal junkie, but you like to win deals.
Oh yeah, I'm a deal junkie. And yeah, I like to win deals. I like to hunt for deals. And that's kind of my calling. So
That's
it fit for
awesome.
that.
So coming into real estate, tell us a little bit about, obviously you had the fortune. Well, we'll start with this. You had the fortune of knowing what it's like to be a real estate agent because you saw your dad do it 24/7, I'm sure. Well, he's figured out some ways around that, but it's a pretty big job. What did you learn as having that fresh perspective? I'd love to know, and I think everybody else would. What was that like, having, being born into it? What was your perspective of it? And then take us through that shift into actually being it.
I think there's actually a couple facets to that. I mean, the first thing was I didn't really know what my dad did, and I didn't know how hard he worked until I got into it. And it was interesting a decade later to see my wife go through the same thing when she joined the team as a buyer agent, to understand all that really goes in to getting a listing and then bringing that to close, even with a full administrative staff. I mean, there's a lot of work that goes into that. And I never appreciated that as a kid, but now working with them, I do. Um, and I think the other thing too, and I didn't understand it at the time, but it was a blessing. My dad held me back on purpose. When I wanted to work as a real estate agent in his office, he wasn't hiring, and he didn't hire me until someone quit. And then the job opening was there, and I was administrative. And then when a buyer agent quit, I became a buyer agent. And then eventually I became a listing agent. So I kind of had to work my way up. And I didn't think that was fair at first, but I knew how to do a CMA before I was ever a buyer agent or a listing agent. And I knew how the back end worked so I could be better at my job on the front end.
Exactly. Exactly. Coming into it, it's kind of like it felt like a curse and it was a blessing coming into it and having a dad that had you go earn your way, even though he could have just handed it to you on a silver platter. What do you think was your biggest? Because obviously, well, I already said this, but coming into it, it didn't seem like it should be that way. But now that you went through it that way, what was your biggest kind of lesson or aha going through the process of becoming an agent? About the business or about being an agent or both?
I mean, I think my biggest ahas, in my short time in this career has been um, understanding to slow down, to speed up, taking the time with people, taking the time for myself and my family. So, making sure that I'm not working 6 or 7 days a week and I'm not working 24/7, but actually making it a point to take time off and to shut the phone off and the computer off. I spent several years not having or owning a computer at home on purpose, so that I was forced, if I had to work, I had to go to the office physically to work. Um, that was that was a tough lesson. And then the other one would have been um, to make money and to have longevity in this business, I had to be a listing agent. And that was a really tough thing, cutting ties with being a buyer agent.
Really? Okay, so those are two really like different directions to go in. I'll start with the most recent one. It was tough to cut off being a buyer agent to being a listing agent. What was tough about that?
I think it was
Why was that
everything
tough?
it was everything I had known. And it was how I made my money, or at least 50% of my money was being a buyer agent. And then the other 50% was being a listing agent. But I felt I could never really be a good listing agent if I continued to show homes. So to make that decision that if I get a buyer saying, show me a home, or write an offer for me, to actually hand that off to someone else, it's a tough decision.
Especially when your mentality in this is to always be on the lookout for, because we're not getting paid by the hour every couple of weeks. We're getting paid by the deal, and then you have to say no to a deal. So how did you find, I think a lot of people try to do that and they don't really get to that. How did you find the discipline or the infrastructure, or obviously you had some built in, but how did you really kind of enforce that with yourself and make it happen? And how did that pay off?
For me, it was accountability. So I'm not given the choice. I am accountable in the sense that, I need others to count on me. And those are my sellers. They need my time. And so I needed to give them that time. So something had to go. And I think having a goal and a plan, I knew what I wanted to be and what I wanted to be good at. And so, even though I was stepping into the unknown back when I had done it, I knew I had to do it if I wanted to become the kind of agent I had in my mind.
And what is the difference? And we're going to go back to this time thing too in this business and balance. But what is the difference between a good buyer's agent and a good listing agent?
For me, a good buyer agent, because in our company, I ran the buyer agent team as the buyer agent team manager, or I don't know, whatever fancy terms it's called these days.
But you ever saw the buyer agents? That was your job.
Yeah, it was my responsibility to crack the whip, hire them, fire them, manage lead software, that kind of stuff. And a good buyer agent to me was someone who was motivated internally and they were personable. They were good at selling, but even better, they could have a conversation with a doorknob. You could teach.
So personality, conversationalist, good intuition, good at handling people. Does that kind of cover?
Yeah, you need, those are the stuff that you can't teach that stuff. You can teach real estate, but you can't teach motivation. You can't teach that instinct. So.
And the sense of urgency, I think I always find like the really successful ones have a certain sense of level, a sense of urgency, but that they know how to keep in check, to not drive themselves crazy, but to keep the right things a priority and get them done, whatever it takes, maybe.
Yeah, I think so.
How do you know how and when, and we still have to get back to this time thing, but you keep taking me down this path of more and more questions. This is good stuff because you guys run a team so well. How do you know? Because a lot of people, I think, or a lot of teams, you bring on the agents and you just let them do their thing. And if they sell, they sell. And if they don't, they don't, or whatever. How do you know when to hire and fire? Or it's hard to know when to fire them for a lot of people. How do you guys decide the difference between somebody you do and don't hire, and once you get them, how do you know when they need to be fired, and how do you let them go?
That's a tough question, because no one, I don't care who you are, no one likes to fire anyone. But there is a cost per transaction. There's a cost per listing. There's a cost per deal, and there's a cost per buyer transaction too. When you average it all out, I think it just comes down to knowing your numbers. If it's costing you so much to have a buyer side transaction or so much to keep a listing. That puts it in perspective.
Yeah.
If someone's not performing, they're costing you money, not making you money, and they need to go. And same goes for a listing. If a listing, doesn't meet those standards, that seller needs to be let go.
Yeah. And I find that interesting because I think a lot of people like to think that they're selective about their sellers, but it sounds like you guys have a pretty set standard on what you're going to take and not take, because you're very aware, unlike a lot of agents, that it does cost you money and what it's costing you.
It all depends if we're in a contest or not with a friend. If we're in a listing contest, then we'll list just about everything.
Everything changes because you just want to win, right?
Right. But no, I think you got to be selective, or else you're taking things that are just going to expire or be nightmare sellers. And and then if you have a listing for 2-3 months and they're unmotivated, they're canceling showings, the home doesn't show well, they're unwilling to price reduce, I think those are all indicators that it's time to let them go and look for some fresh new stuff.
What does that conversation look like?
Well, I think part of that conversation is earned. That conversation is earned with prior communication with them on a weekly or every 2-week minimum basis. So I'm always communicating with my sellers every 10 to 14 days. And those conversations are about showing activity, new listings in their neighborhood, new pendings, what the pricing is like in days on market, showings, feedback, all the things that indicate to us we're either on track or off track. And then I think every conversation should be a pricing conversation. Not necessarily asking for a price cut, but reminding them that price is what moves all. Price is what moves.
So the conversation doesn't come out of nowhere, or it doesn't feel like a slap in the face when it happens.
No,
it's always
I don't
something you've
just
got to
pop in
consider.
3 months down the road and say it's time to let you go. It's a light up to that.
Yeah. So, and we are still going to get back to that time thing, but while we're on the topic of listings, you like to win listings, even when they're not the best listings for you, and then you have to backtrack, which is not a bad thing. That's not a bad position to be in. I've got a lot of questions. Give us what do you love about listing? What do you love about winning listings? And do you have a pitch? Do you have a way you build rapport? What is your kind of strength? I don't like to say knack or trick because I don't think it's a trick, but kind of what is your strength in winning listings, and what do you find is the, way to influence the right clients to work with you?
Well, I think.
Or do they have to influence you to work with them?
No, I'm having to influence them. We're up against, usually every listing appointment's a multiple agent interview, and so it's winning out against other agents and not compromising on integrity by reducing commission or taking overpriced listings to get the listing. So it's having to win by just being the best. I think part of that strength just comes from knowing the market, knowing what's selling and what price brackets and what frequency. A lot of that comes from actually talking with sellers, talking with the agents who are showing our listings for feedback, and prospecting and talking to the expires, the for sale by owners, and the people who are interviewing you for the listing. Knowing what sellers are looking for and what buyers and agents are looking for kind of helps you communicate that, and it builds confidence.
Mm-hmm.
So I think
yeah. No, go ahead.
I'd say my pitch, my go-to is creating a false sense of urgency. That's my go-to is, and there's always anything in everyone's market. You could say this is an artificial deadline. By the end of the year, before the inventory rises, while the buyers are still out there looking, while there's still 10 homes a day selling, whatever it is, stats always go 2 ways, but you can manipulate those stats to kind of help you get in the door.
Numbers don't lie. People who do numbers lie. Have you heard that quote
I'm
before?
not,
I'm giving you
I'm
a hard
not lying.
time.
I'm just working.
I'm giving you a hard time.
I'm in my favor.
I'm totally giving you a hard time. But yeah, I mean, that's great. That's great information. But it's like, understand the numbers. Right now, 10 houses a month are selling. We don't know when that's going to end. That's reality. And knowing to look for those numbers, what numbers are relevant for the decisions they're making, and knowing how to present them and get that information to present to them. So I want one more about the list, because I know you're good at winning listings. What do you think is your biggest strength? Is it the creating that sense of urgency and giving them important data, your strength in winning listings, or what would you say it is?
I mean, I think first and foremost, more than I love to win, I hate to lose. So it just instilled in my bones that losing is not an option. But I think it's mindset. Whether even if it's a past client, someone you've known for a decade. Last Friday, I went on 2 appointments. They were both past clients, and in both cases, I was up against other agents. I was a little frustrated by it, admittedly, but that's the reality of our business and our industries. They're going to find and meet other people. Other people are going to solicit them, and we're fools to think it's not the truth. And my mindset is it's not a fun presentation if I'm not against someone. I just spin it in my favor. That's the fun part about it. If it was a slam dunk, it wouldn't be any fun. So
That's awesome. That's awesome. So that makes you competitive. What is the most competitive thing do you think about your presentation? Is it your knowledge of the market? Or, of course, I should be answering it for you, but that's what I'm seeing. But what is it?
I think it's the drive, it's the confidence, and it's having a solid track record and a plan. I think
so confidence, track record, and a plan. Does that sum it up?
That sums it up. And saying the same thing. Saying the same thing is important because I can get stopped mid-sentence. I can handle an objection and go right back to my presentation.
Staying on point. So let's talk a little bit about anything else about the listing presentation before I go into how you manage to turn your computer off and really like check out, and how often and how much, and the pros and cons of that. Anything else about the listing presentation?
Well, that's about it for me, unless you have any other questions.
I'll think of more, maybe. Okay, so back to, we were talking earlier about in this business, you've learned there was a point in time, and tell me if I'm missing anything, but reiterating what we were saying before, in this business, it's kind of a 24/7, or it can be. And early in the business, phone was on the computer, always. Don't even ask my kids because I'm a little bit of that, but always on, responding, getting on top of things. And at some point you go, okay, you got to turn the phone off. You got to check out. You've got to remove yourself from it and come back. How do you do that? When do you do that? But before you answer that, what happened to get you to that?
I think it was burnout. I think it was answering the phone whenever it rang, and not taking a day off just finally got to me. And that seemed like the only logical solution is to purposely take a day off and then eventually take Saturday and Sunday off. Luckily, I'm in a second home market full of retirees, so Monday is the same as Sunday in our market. So taking a weekend off doesn't really affect me as it might in other areas of the country. So for some of the other listeners, maybe it's taking off Tuesdays and Thursdays, or Wednesday and Thursday, if Saturday and Sunday is your busy day, but you've got to take a little time off.
And did you ever, because everybody has that fear in our competitive industry, that when I turn my phone off, somebody else is going to be there to take the business. How did you deal with that? Did you leverage your team and other people to manage the calls? Did you find out people actually don't mind waiting, or give it, what's been your experience?
I think part of that has to come from the confidence of, if you're waiting for business and you're waiting for your phone to ring, that's going to be a perpetual fear. But if you're going out there and making the phone ring and you're hunting, then you've got the ability to turn down opportunity or turn down business, or at least be selective with it. That's, I think, the mentality of an agent who has 1 or 3 listings versus an agent who's carrying, 50 listings. One who's carrying 50 listings is not worried about losing one.
Well said.
They know they can come into work the next day and find another one.
Well, there's that. And tell me what your experience is in this is that when you don't want to remove yourself and become unavailable. That's not the key. But when you set boundaries with customers and clients, there's a study that they're for only a certain amount of time every day, and you only have so much capacity as far as time goes to be productive before you need rest or before you have diminishing returns on your activity. So you be very, when you go to work, you're at work and you're 3 times more productive than you would be if you worked twice as many hours. And when you remove yourself for a minute, the clients appreciate the call when you're available. And there's a little bit of desirability to somebody who sets boundaries, perhaps. Would you say that's been your experience?
Yeah, I've certainly thought that. So, it's like a restaurant that's by reservation only, and it suddenly becomes that much more fancy, and you want to go and eat there. And
yeah.
So, if a client calls you and says, "When can you be over?" You're like, "In 30 minutes." I mean, what does that tell the seller? But if you have a schedule and you say, "I can be there at 3 or 4. If that doesn't work, I'm available at 5 o'clock tomorrow," then that even just artificially tells that seller, well, they're a busy guy. They must do a lot of business.
Everybody wants what everybody wants. And if you're wanted by other people, then they want you too.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's actually in a strange way more powerful to set those boundaries. It makes you look more attractive. And I think the other part
it makes you more attractive. Yeah, keep going though.
Yeah. Well, I was given a quote, and I don't know who gave it to me or where it came from, but work fills the time allotted. And that's kind of always stuck with me, that, just because you give it a whole bunch of time doesn't mean you're actually getting a whole lot of work done. I could probably do in a couple of days what a lot of agents are doing in 7, just because my efficiencies are better. And so when you cut down the time, you're forced to delegate more, and you're forced to become more efficient or fail.
And focus on what you're good at. Spend your time on what you're good at.
And delegate the stuff you're not. There's other people around you that are good at things you're not.
And you're a very good hunter and winner, to a fault, perhaps.
Yeah.
Because I understand you have won some listings and then realized you shouldn't have won it and had to turn it down on the call that you wanted, which isn't, again, a bad thing. And what we've kind of covered on how you determine that. In being such a great hunter, I would say, Mike, who was on our other interview, which I apologize, everybody, I don't have the interview in front of the number, but do you remember it was episode 1 in the 140s. But he seems like an operations guy. Or did he just learn operations by necessity of being in this business?
I think the latter. Yeah, he's on there too. I got that from him.
Interesting. So in our team, in working with the team, what makes you and your dad such great partners? Because obviously you've been in it, he's your dad, but you're doing really well in the business with him for 10 years. What is the secret? There's something to be said for that.
I've been asked 100 times over. I don't have a good answer. It seems like every mother and daughter, father and son, father-daughter team has kind of always approached us and said, how do you not killing each other? And I don't have a good answer for that. We work well together. We always have. We have a good dynamic. And I think we've got good systems in place. We know when someone has taken a lead to a point where it's theirs and when the other one needs to bow out. And because we're calling a lot of the same leads with the same last name, working with the same company, and saying virtually the same thing. gets kind of weird.
Yeah.
But we have just rules and a system in place. When someone's knee deep in a lead, the other one backs down.
That's awesome. Well, and that gives you time to go win some more because you like doing that anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There's plenty to go around.
So, we've covered a lot on really the keys to balance and the value. There's actual value other than you get rest to setting boundaries, reasonable boundaries, of course. And the other one is winning pitches. Anything else we should touch on before I ask you our final 3 questions? And don't be nervous, they're fun questions.
Okay.
On the interview. See, I'm getting him now because I don't think he listened to Mike's interview before this one. So I'm giving him a hard time. Now he's got to go back and listen to it. But anything else you find that like you would want to share or that you feel is a real knack or strength that you have in this industry and being a real estate agent?
I'd say, and this has been challenged recently with my wife coming into the business and being a buyer agent in a great way though. Is don't forget why you're doing it. Real estate is a great means to an end, but remember why you're doing it and for whom you're doing it for. And so when you're working 6 to 10 and 7 days a week, you're ignoring your family, your kids, and your wife or husband at the expense of the real estate business and your clients. And it should be the other way around. And I've been guilty of that. So I'm speaking from experience from someone who's kind of had to turn that ship around and get it back on the right course. It's not all about the next deal or about real estate. It's about why you're doing it.
What great advice. And you may not, but do you have any story you could take us back and go to that place and say, this is what was going on and this is how bad it got and this is what I did and I knew, like, that was the moment I knew I had to change and this is how I changed it?
No, I think it's just inherently I'd work until I can't no more. So I have to just have those boundaries set in place so that I know I don't get myself to the
before you get too far.
It's all about being accountable. So for me, it's 5:30. When 5:30 hits, I'm in the car and I'm home. When I get home, I put the phone on the counter, and a lot of times I lose it. So it's just setting a line that you don't cross, so that you don't have to have that conversation one day with yourself or your spouse or your kids.
God, what great words of wisdom and what great advice. And there's so much value to be had for that. Final 3 questions. Number 1, if there is a tool, and it could be an app, some kind of a networking system, something you do, anything you apply, or an app, well, I think it's an app or a CRM, whatever it is there some tool that you utilize for your business other than your phone that you just couldn't live without?
I am a 90-year-old trapped in a 30-year-old's body, a pen and paper. Don't forget to take notes. Just slow down to speed up. Yeah, there you go.
I'm all about that. It's something about pen and paper. It sticks better.
Be organized.
I do it when I talk to people. I do it just to keep me listening and focused. But go ahead. Yeah.
So when you're in a listing presentation, when you go to a restaurant and the waiter's not writing down what you're ordering, what are you thinking? They're going to mess this up.
Yeah.
Write notes during the listing appointment. Write notes when you're on the phone with a client. Write notes when you're following up. And there's something about writing it down. You can glance back over to it. And, versus popping it into a CRM or your phone, chances are it's lost forever in there. So.
Yeah. And I remember I talked to a really high producer, and she said she kept a book, and in her book she wrote all day everything. She tracked it in her book because that was how it stuck, and she was like, that's how it sticks for me and how I keep up with it. And she actually I put mine back into a CRM, or I use Contactually or the Compass CRM. I know I'm kind of in Contactually. Do you use Contactually or the Compass CRM?
I've never opened either.
What? I can't believe that. I'm kidding. Kind of.
That's where the delegation.
I mean, you used to do 200 something deals a year. What CRM do you use, or do you not know that because you have a manager who does it all for you?
They'll make reports and stuff to me like these, but
you don't even know where they keep it. I love it.
They put the data in. I just ask them to spit it out.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And that was that listing data, showings, feedback. What data was that?
That was just, I think that was sourcing business where listings were coming from this year, so that I could do my best to duplicate and amplify that next year.
I mean, guys, these guys are like so streamlined. It's insane. I love it. Look, I'm going to come to see y'all in Fort Myers and Cape Coral and just like have my entire team shadow y'all for a week or a year. I mean, it's awesome. Okay. So just everything is so, everything is so methodical. It's so impressive. Next question. Is there a book, and it's okay if you're not a reader, but is there a book that you would recommend we read listening to this podcast that's most affected your career and or life?
Yeah, my favorite book of all time, and I've read it at least 10 or 15 times, is Relentless.
Love that book.
Yeah. So,
go ahead.
If you don't have the hunter bone in your body, read that book and you will. So for me, that's a fire-up book.
What? Because I've got a couple things to say about that book before I do. That is a great book. Mark Noah in Beverly Hills, he's a Sotheby's agent, said that book to me a couple of years ago. Incredible book. What's your biggest takeaway? Was there any takeaway, any biggest thing that you got out of that?
I think anyone, so in the book, this is the trainer who trains some of the NBA elites, and these days he's even training a lot of the NFL elites. It's a combination of a coach who's willing to beat the tar out of his clients and clients who want a coach that will take them to the next level and beat the tar out of them. It's a mutual relationship for, just like the book says, to find those few people who are relentless to get what they want. And I think it's a book that touches on some of the dark underbelly of what it takes.
Like honest. It's frighteningly honest book.
Yeah, and I think there's a few people who will read that book and say, I don't understand. You never will. But then there's the people who read that and say, okay, there's others out there like me. And it's refreshingly honest.
And it's actually, I don't know about you, but I laughed because it's there's a certain thing about harsh truth that's funny.
Yeah.
That was that. Like there were parts of that book I was literally laughing because I was like, this is hilarious, but it's so true. My favorite line. No, go ahead.
On Audible, it's even better to hear it.
Well, that's how actually I only do Audible. Yeah, okay. Exactly. So my favorite, I don't really read. I have Audible in my car in between appointments. And I literally will listen to books for 5 to 15 minutes at a time, but I get them in. My favorite line in that book, I don't remember I know one of his first clients was Michael Jordan. And it was when everybody was like, oh, for what you do, you need to go get a job and be a PE coach at high school or a sports coach at high school. And he's like, no, because he was relentless. And he went after Michael Jordan and got him and got several the professional athletes throughout his career. But one of my favorite parts, or maybe perhaps my favorite in the book, is I don't remember the basketball player's name, but the guy was like in a funk. He couldn't get it together. And he kept this quote, the author, and now I've forgotten his name.
I think Wade.
I don't think it is, but I'm not going to say it's not. So anyway, but the basketball player this is how ignorant I am in sports as much as I love the book. Because I don't think the author.
No, I don't remember the coach's name. But,
well, we'll find it. We'll have it in the show notes, everybody, at andrewdarda.jeremetcalfpodcast.com. But in the meantime, my favorite, or just what stuck with me anyway, is this guy, whoever it was out on the court, couldn't get his act together, and he's got this quote in his pocket, the author pulls the quote out, and it says, to have what you really want, you must first be who you really are. Like, whoever that is, you've got to, like you were saying, it's refreshing to see, like, everybody's got a little bit of that dark side or the relentless people, or like, I'm not the only one, or whatever it is. But he pulled it out. But that quote, I was like, had it all over social media when I read it. because I was like, that's it. To have what you really want, you've got to be who you were wired to be. And a lot of that book for me, that just resonated, and I just loved it.
I think a lot of people they look at someone else and they want to be him or her. They look at someone else's business. And that goes back to another quote I heard years ago and I don't know if it's still around. I assume it is, Success Magazine. They used to have these.
Yeah, I think it is.
And I heard someone say, everyone wants what everyone else has because they see the presentation on stage, but they never get to see what's behind the curtains, all the hard work, weeks, months, years, blood, sweat, and tears that went in to make that 30-minute production up on stage. So be careful what you want to emulate, because you don't know what's behind the curtains.
And that reminds me, I think it was Tim Ferriss. We're going to keep going back and forth, but this is fun. I think it was Tim Ferriss, or there was somebody that said, and maybe it was from the same place. I don't think this was Success Magazine though, but he said, I always wanted to be like the Beatles or a rock star. But to do that meant you had to travel and play late at night and lug your stuff everywhere and sing to audiences who didn't care and not, spend money you didn't have and so forth and so on. And he's like, I didn't want to do that. He said, instead of looking at the end, what you really have to look at is the path to get there what you love, because that's what it is. Or I think to the same thing you said, but I think it was Tim Ferriss, because it was somebody like that who wanted, and if Tim Ferriss ever hears this and is like, that wasn't me, sorry, Tim. But I wish I knew who it was. Anyway, but yeah. But relentless, everybody. And
anything from Grant Cardone too.
Oh, Grant Cardone is like, I haven't listened to him much. Like the 10X Factor, is that the book?
Yeah, 10X, and he's got a couple other ones.
Everybody, I got to listen to him. I've listened to him a little bit, but everybody's like, that guy is hardcore, like all the way. What's your biggest takeaway from him?
I think it's just that, go above and beyond what people would consider as normal. Hire before you need the employee. Be willing to fire them if they're not performing. If it needs to be posted in 3 different spots, 3 different times. If you really want it, go big or go home.
Go big or go home, which is, what's that?
And he's made a career of that, and he's a wealthy man because of that. So,
high energy guy. All right. Last question. If there's one thing from this interview that we should make sure, if we're going to forget everything else, what should we most definitely remember from this interview today, or that you may have not shared with us yet? Come on. Where there've been like 5 really good ones. Yeah, I can give you a multiple choice.
Okay, I'll take that.
Okay.
I'll take the cop
Number
out.
1, you got to balance. You got to turn it off. Number 2, if you're going to last, you got to list. Number 3, you got to do whatever it takes. Be relentless. To be successful, it's not about being what other people are. It's about being who you are. There's 4. Any of those, or?
I would say I would go with the number 2. Yeah, to last in this industry, you've got to make a commitment to list property.
And then apply those other 3 to it. What's that?
And perfect that trade. Perfect your art of listing property. And there's no right way to do it or wrong way, but there's your way. And get better at your way. But just know that's where the money is. That's where the longevity in this business is. And that's where, and that's going to shed a lot of the disappointment and grief that is associated with working with buyers.
Awesome. Thank you.
So, my pleasure. Thanks you for having me.